Hello, in this video I'm going to talk you through some sort of advanced tips and tricks for designing a website. We're going to look at two examples. We're going to look at this, which is called the SignedX project, and we're going to look at this, which is called the 1619 project. To start over here, as you'll notice immediately, this website is designed a little bit differently than the ones that we looked at in the last video, the two sites focused on immigration, right? This is in what's called a blog format, right? You'll notice it looks pretty similar to our class blog, where instead of having a static homepage that has images and links and text that you can read, this one has a series of blog posts that you can click on to read those instead. Yeah, so it is very similar to our class blog. And so what this website does is it combines a lot of different stories from people who have survived sexual violence, so that someone can come to this website, read these stories in order to learn about sort of the effects that sexual violence has on people, or if they're a survivor themselves, to not feel so alone, right? To know that there are other people out there who have experienced something similar. So for example, if I click on any one of these posts, the full post appears, and I can see what this person has written about their experience, as well as a couple images, right? And as we talked about with the last video, this website, because it's dealing with such a sensitive subject, right, uses black and white so that it feels sort of appropriately somber, right? Really bright, cheerful colors when talking about sexual violence would feel really inappropriate, to the point that you would lose credibility as a website, right? And even the fact that the picture at the top is a little bit more somber, whereas the pictures as we go down stay somber and then get a little bit more happy and a little bit happier, right? Probably follows the progression of the story, right? As we talked about with your guys' own project ones, where the picture should have a progression. It also means that the reader is pretty far along before they get this happy image. Yeah. So once again, sort of maintaining that somber tone until the reader is pretty deep in. And it's important to note here, while we're looking at this site, that when you make your own website, you're going to have to decide if you make your content as a page or a post, right? And these things are different, and the difference is important. A page is something static, right? It will stay the same. You can link to it, but every single time a person clicks on it, it's going to look pretty much the same unless you go in and re-edit it, right? So this is their about page, talks about the project and the person who runs it, yeah? Whereas a post is something that when you have a blog style page, the most recent post will show at the top, right? So if this creator added a new post, it would go here, right? And this one would move over to this spot, and this one would move over to that spot, so on and so forth, right? So if what you want in your site is to have content that you can consistently update and add new stuff to, right? Making it a post is probably the way to go. If you are pretty sure you want to showcase, for example, 3 of the mini projects we did for this class, and just have that be that and not change it, then you probably want to make them as pages. Yeah, so that's just something to consider as you're designing your own website. Because often advocacy sites use this format, right, where they're taking the story of maybe people who suffer from mental illness, or people who've lost loved ones to gun violence or something like that, and sharing those stories together, right? Maybe I've seen it with people who suffer from eating disorders, right? So thinking about this as a possible format for your advocacy site, if the goal of your site is to raise awareness and to create community, this can be very effective, right? This site, if we talk about message once again, is sending the message that the first step to dealing with sexual violence is to raise awareness and to let survivors know that they're not alone in these experiences, right? Okay, so something to think about as you're designing your advocacy project. Another site that's, once again, an advocacy site, but that's a little bit unusual, and I want to give you as an example, is the New York Times 1619 project. And this site focuses on the effects of racism on the United States society, politics, education, right, all that sort of stuff. So this site, what you'll immediately notice is that there aren't a lot of links right? Usually we get like a whole menu up here for most websites. But with this one, we just have the link to go back to the New York Times Magazine or to share this page, right? Those are the only options. So if you don't want to do either of those things, the only thing, there's no about page, right? There's no like click to get to a blog. There's no sort of get in touch here, right? Put your email here, right? There's none of that. And this very simple top of the page. And instead, what that essentially does, remember we talked about attention, is that it forces you to scroll, right? Instead of clicking through links and looking for the information that you have come to find, you instead are forced to scroll and look at the information in the order that the website designers have put it. So instead of being able to, click to the about page and find what this is, figure out what this website's all about, you instead have to read, in August of 1619, a ship appeared on this horizon near Point Comfort, a coastal port in the English colony of Virginia. It carried more than 20 enslaved Africans who were sold to the colonists. No aspect of the country that would be formed here has been untouched by the years of slavery that followed. On the 400th anniversary of this fateful moment, it is finally time we tell our story truthfully. All right? So essentially, the website doesn't let you engage with the site unless you read that, right? So then we get to this little about blurb, I should say. The 1619 Project is an ongoing initiative from the New York Times Magazine that began in August 2019, the 400th anniversary of the beginning of American slavery. It aims to reframe the country's history by placing the consequences of slavery and the contributions of Black Americans at the very center of our national narrative, right? So then you can read more about it if you want, right? So you can jump here and get to this longer blurb, right? So as we continue to scroll through this site, you'll notice once again that it's using graphic elements to set the tone and send a message. So even things like this font that has the little swirl on the ends of the capital letters, right, gives a sort of historical feel, right? It almost reminds you of the handwriting that you see on the nation's founding documents, right, like the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution. And that's intentional, right? This website is trying to evoke history. It's trying to get us to think about history and how we tell the story of this country. The image is also striking, right? If most people, when creating a website about the effects of slavery on America, would not think, oh yes, we need an image of a sort of blank horizon line under a cloudy sky. Yeah, they might think of, historical illustrations of, plantations or of slave markets, right? But they didn't go that route. They went with this much more simple image. And I think one of the messages it's sending here is that this photograph could have been taken, if we had a time machine at really any time, right? It has a sort of timelessness to it. And I think that part of the message being sent here is that, that the impacts of slavery are ongoing, right? While slavery, in the way that we commonly think about it in the United States, is in the past, the effects of it are still being felt. And so I think they wanted to create this page that at once evokes history without sort of separating history from the present, if that makes sense, implying that we are still part of that history and that it's all connected. This opening image also sets a very somber tone, right, with those grays, without being gruesome, right? There's a lot of effort in the discussion around slavery to not sort of make it feel like people are looking at it in order to be like shocked, right? The way you might sort of look at photographs of gruesome things with a sort of morbid curiosity, right? The creators of this site do not want to inspire that reaction in their viewers. So instead, this simpler, somber photograph that sends a message about the ways that history persists into our present. So as we continue scrolling, we start to get still this very somber tone, still the references to history, right? The American flag there. It says, our democracy's founding ideals were false when they were written. Black Americans had fought to make them true. So this is the sort of opening essay of the site, and it gives a history of how, because this country claimed that it was founded on freedom and equity, even at a time when a significant percentage, up to 20% in some states, or even more in states like Mississippi and Alabama, was enslaved, that those ideals were simply not lived up to when America was founded. And so this website gives a sort of walkthrough of how the activism of Black Americans to fight first against slavery and then for civil rights and for social justice reform have essentially forced America to live up to the values that it claimed at its beginning. So this essay in some ways acts as a little bit of an introduction, and that's definitely why it's positioned here right at the top of the page. And then as we keep scrolling, once again, the website continues to sort of force you to interact with it step by step by step. You can't just skip to the essay by Matthew Desmond, right? You can't just skip to this photo essay about sort of how we still see reminders of slavery in American landscapes like Cotton Avenue, right, which often denoted where cotton was sold and also sometimes slaves as well. So as you scroll through here, right, and it literally won't let me scroll past it until I've scrolled through all the photos. So this website is controlling attention very directly in order to force me to interact with it in a particular way, step by step. I can't skip anything. I can't just come to this website, look for what I want, and then leave, right? So I don't think that most of you will be creating a website that looks much like this, right? It would take a little bit more coding know-how than I think a lot of us have, but it's a really good example of that strategy of attention being used very particularly, right, to force the viewer to interact with the website in one way. So something to keep in mind as you're designing your websites: what content do you want your viewers to interact with first, second, and third, right? And how do you make sure that they do that? How do you guide them to interacting with your site in that way?